where Wall Street financed the fall of the Romanov dynasty, the Bolshevik revolution, and the installation of communism in Russia, which they're now demonizing, and Maoism, communism, cultural Marxism in China, is the utility of the British Crown, the Vatican, and the Anglo-American Compact, Wall Street. So let's just always keep our sights on the fact that the calamities that we point at today are really the devise of our own governments.
Well, I know in 2010, the United Nations did something extraordinary. It invited the cast and the scriptwriters of the Battlestar Galactica series to give a presentation on how to solve, how they kind of approached this kind of intergalactic conflict and how that could be applied to international conflict. And so that was remarkable, because the UN had never done anything like that before. And that kind of stood out. So were you in any way involved with that?
Well, it's so interesting you say that, because I was probably part responsible in as much as I paved the way for Dr. Brian O'Leary, who was a beloved friend of mine, the erstwhile Apollo a scientist, astronaut, mission leader, who was intended to lead the mission to Mars, if you remember, before Congress reneged or bailed on allocating the budget for that mission. But Brian O'Leary was a beloved friend and very involved in, I guess, not so much exopolitics as he was trying to disclose the truth of the secret space program and the fact that things were not quite what they seemed in the shadow government and the shadow NASA basement. So he was vying for disclosure. I helped him and got him into the United Nations to speak to relevant parties there. And at the same time, I was also encouraging conversations between the Bishop of Jerusalem and Edgar Mitchell and Stephen Bassett and others who are and were involved in the fringes of the exopolitic movement. So, and that was 2010. So I guess I was in some way also responsible for that emergence in the political arena.
Yeah, that was very interesting, because I actually did some research into the Battlestar Galactica series in terms of its creator, Glen Larson, actually working with Leslie Stevens IV, who was the son of a Navy admiral and was read in to the Navy's secret space program. And so, and he wrote the pilot episode for Battlestar Galactica originally. So it kind of like, I think it was a soft disclosure that not only are there these human extraterrestrials out there, but also these kind of artificial synthetic life forms that are involved in this kind of like battle between organics and synthetics throughout the galaxy. And that seems to be a constant even now. So yeah, do you want to kind of like speak to that? Because people are thinking about AI and the danger, but is it something that also applies to this kind of extraterrestrial phenomenon, and how do we deal with that?
A great question, a bit broad in context, but I would say that what's emerging now in the gestalt or in the zeitgeist is the fact that we are having to take a reckoning with the fabric of so-called reality as a genus, as a species, as a civilization, as a planetary culture. We're having to put away religious dogma. We're having to put away political and social ideologies and socioeconomic sensibilities. We're having to look at far more profound and impactful aspects to creation and to reality. And that's always a standoff in this dualistic universe between the organic and the fictitious. So the curiosity that we're faced with as a conundrum, as a dilemma, is what is real and what is not real? What is born of God and what is born of the false light? It's a confounding dilemma that's facing humanity. And because human beings emphasize the angelic aspect of the human, we are all galactic hybrids, to be sure, and we carry a multiplicity of galactic or cosmic genetic expressions within each of us. Some of us more emphatic with Syrian or Venusian or Andromedan gene expression, the Africans, for instance, or the mantis element in the Southeast Asian and the Asian genome. So there is a fantastic tapestry of cosmic and genetic gene expressions going on. But all of it ultimately compounds into the human. And it is the angelic aspect of the human that is prevailing. That is the emergence of the pulse of humanity, the common pulse of humanity, which is the Christed mantle, the second coming, so to speak. That's the thing that's emerging here. And it is forcing upon us a reckoning at the individual and the collective level. This is a very beautiful and profound and epochal time for that reason. But what it's doing, as you know, human beings are quantum capacitors of limitless creative force and prana or kundalini or life force, universal force. And what we do is we think things into manifestation. So we I put ideas into the field, and then we put attention on those ideas, and that's what manufactures or manifests reality. And we're now awakening to the somewhat sorry fact that we have collectively been subjugated to the let's say lower elemental, lower astral, extraterrestrial forces to some great extent. There has been a battle between angelic and demonic elements, so to speak. That's just playing out in the theater of our ideas. And so we project those ideas into the field, and what we get back is this fictitious reality born of the Vatican complex, governments, and black and white dialectic of Republicans and Democrats, and he's and she's, and all the nonsense that the binary dualistic human mind gets enchanted into. The invitation, the real invitation, Michael, to my mind, is the point of transcendence, that we're being invited actually to now supersede or to transmute and transcend that binary logic and step into our, again, I use the term our Christed mantle, to assume that mantle and stop playing binary dialectics, start to recognize that we're all sons and daughters of God, that we are all creators in that sense. So for me, everything that is playing out, the fictitious versus the organic, the artificial, the artificialization of our sentient organic reality is a natural kind of endgame apocalyptic or Armageddonist scenario, that the invisible mastery behind the lower elemental aspect of humanity is seeking to artificialize our field of reality, because arguably this is the very last time, because it is the end of time, that these lower elemental forces or demonic forces are able to, or lower frequency, lower vibrational forces are able to sustain their own traction on this earthly temporal plane. Why? Because this plane of existence, Tara, Gaia, Earth, is born of the angelic. It is a covenant between the living sons and daughters of God on the surface of the earth and the Atman, the Godhead, the living God, the living gospel. It is up to us how we choose to steer reality from here. And that's the great reckoning, where each of us having to grow up very quickly and to transmute and transcend binary logic and duality. So I see the artificialization or the attempt at AI transhumanism and all of the calamity that that represents. And even I'd go so far as to say the satanic and Luciferian interventionism into human mRNA through the COVIDiocy and all that we've experienced in the last 500 years, essentially, which has been the great corridor of the 9 gates of hell that we entered into on the day that Hernan Cortez landed on the shores of Mexico and planted the papal flag and pronounced dominion over the indigenous people of the Americas, and then holocausted them, genocided them, which is what the British and the Dutch and the Portuguese and the Spanish did all around the world at the behest of the Vatican. So that started 500 years ago. That blood cult, that Holocaust, genociding of the black skin, brown skin, red skin, yellow skin people, invoked huge black magic, so to speak, into the field. And that black magic was the utility of, let's say, less evolved forces in the universe that were able to then steer reality. And they steered it all the way to Hillary Clinton and Henry Kissinger. I mean, when you look at these deviant archetypes that have emerged in the world in recent generations, emphasis the Napoleonic Wars, World War I, II, and now this Third World War that we're in. It's an absolute abomination. The systemic poisoning of all living systems in the biosphere, courtesy of our governments and our tax dollars, rendering unto Caesar, you know. So it's all our doing in that sense. I see it as a perfect temple, a perfect school. We must choose the outcomes.
Nanu Nanu.